Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi everyone, it's Vincent. I'm the host of Shape the System, today joined by Olympia, and we're going to talk about insects today, which is super exciting. We actually had an attempt at recording this a little while back and a whole bunch of audio issues, and so we wanted to do it again. But let's jump straight in and understand a little bit about Goterra. What's the problem you're solving? Let's understand this space.
So Goterra started because we wanted to solve the problem of food waste. And then I realised that solving the problem of food waste by using insects ended up with a model that pretty much replicated industrial farming, which was large concentrations of animals in a centralised space and high volumes of feed required to feed those animals, and that feed had to come from a lot of different faraway locations. And so once you realise that's true, then you realise that you have to flip it on its head. So we're solving the problem of food waste with insects, and we're doing it in autonomous modular units.
Okay, cool. I'm going to jump into a bunch of the detail here. So food waste, we're basically looking at places where there's huge amounts of, I guess food coming out of. This is like restaurants and hotels and the like, or councils. What's the kind of the source at the top here?
Everything. And I think that's the biggest problem with food waste, because we look for really high, good investor stories. We want to say, oh, this market segment has X millions of tons of waste, but that doesn't necessarily solve any problems. A big factory will waste a lot of waste, but households waste the most food of all, but each individual household will only waste 5 to 10 kilos each. And so if you're going to solve the problem of food waste, you have to solve the real problems, which are around where waste is made and who's making it and why is it hard to solve that, rather than just look for the largest pile. The largest pile, there's not a lot of it. Interesting. Getting rid of it. So, yeah.
Right. And they're probably being dealt with quite well. The real challenge is, in kind of e-commerce terms, the long tail of waste from every single individual household. Does that mean that you're solving a logistical challenge before you even get to the unit? We'll talk about the unit a bit more in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not ashamed of that. We are creating an opportunity to bring waste management as close to source as possible and create logistically opportunistic capability for a very difficult waste stream. So, how close can we get it? And even if you can't get it on site, so households don't need one on site, but they need it to be opportunistically located. So, solve that problem, because that is the biggest problem.
So, let's dwell on an example. So I live in an apartment block that has 20 apartments. We have now literally just 2 weeks ago, have one of those kind of wheelie bins that you can throw little compostable green bags into. Yeah. Now, the scale of that waste is probably not enough to have a unit, but I imagine an apartment block of 200 apartments probably big enough to have its own disposal unit. Is that no?
No, still not really. 200 potentially, that's maybe 2 ton a week. But what we're saying is, instead of using it that way, medium multi-unit dwellings, so MUDs,
is that what they're called?
Yeah, that's the cool term. All the cool things.
So for people who aren't in Australia, a mug is kind of a semi-derogatory term for just someone who's a mug. Is just an idiot, but a multi-unit dwelling.
That's right. Yeah, if you want to talk infrastructure and you want to sound like you know what you're saying, when it comes to mud.
Okay, perfect.
So MUDs don't tend to exist alone, right? You don't go house, 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 random skyscraper, house, house, house. Right. MUDs are generally multi-unit dwelling, have a density. So you find suburbs that are mostly MUDs and only small amounts of townhomes and single-family homes. And so what you think about is not, can I get one under each of these buildings? You think about, where is the central location for these MUDs that I can place this, so I can get one wheelie bin out of each of these towers, but that collectively, if it only went to this little place here, then I've only travelled, less than 3 kilometres to collect all of that, and I've managed it within that region and in that location. That's what we're trying to do. It doesn't have to always be an all or nothing solution. Sometimes you can make things that are well enough to just fit.
Plug into the others. And then let's talk a little bit about the unit, because I think that's kind of the thing that just really got my attention here. And, it's interesting you started with this idea of industrial farming to be waste management, but let's talk in a little more detail as to what this shipping container size thing does.
So again, it came back to, okay, what are the challenges with waste? And when we've tried to solve waste, what has gone wrong? And so those things are, how humans interact with them, how easily it is for humans to make mistakes or errors, the inconvenience factor. So like, I don't want change. I want things to feel the same. I want it to always be the same. So we started there. So we're like, okay, well, if we can build this system that can be located differently, then it has to interact with the humans the same way as their current bins. So they want to lift a lid or put it into a hopper, and then the machine accepts the waste, right? So it has an external hopper that looks just like a trash compactor, and it accepts the food waste, macerates, heat treats and ferments the food waste, and then the machine manages the feeding of the insect and the managing of the environment. So the insects are happy and they consume as much waste as possible.
Okay. So just coming back a step, so one end of it you put rubbish into and it looks like anything you would put rubbish into, no harm, no foul. The other end of it is actually a really kind of controlled environment in which a maggot effectively is living. How many of these things? Millions of them, presumably.
There's a lot.
A lot. Bigger than one, less than a billion.
No, there is a lot in there. And then basically what we say is, so there's around 450 trays inside.
Okay.
And so each of those trays are carrying several kilos of larvae. And and those larvae, basically the machine houses the larvae so that they can live happily, and it's just all packed out of a shipping container.
Right. So you just wall-to-wall maggots that are effectively consuming this byproduct from taking the raw waste, and then they're on a cycle, right? They're on however long their larval cycle is.
Yeah.
And these beautiful conditions, like the ultimate growing conditions, and then everything changes. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's like Darwin in there, and they're very happy, they're very hot, and they're very warm, and they're very humid.
Oh, sorry, Darwin the place.
They're not Darwin. That would be weird. And then in the 12th day after we've put them in there, we vacuum them out. So we're basically evacuating the system, and we vacuum them out. It's the easiest way to manage them. And then what we do is we sift the larva from what you're vacuuming up is larva and frass, and the frass is their manure. And so you commingle the two of them, and then we take them back and we sift the two. So that way then we've got a saleable product of frass. We have the larva that we can use to further process as a protein, and that's the sort of servicing requirement that we have.
I was going to say, what's frass exactly?
Frass is the insect's manure.
Okay, but what do we do with it?
I was like, what do you mean what?
You know what I mean? I mean, is it like go in your garden? Like who's buying frass?
Well, mostly farmers for right now. We've got a few market garden people who are pretty serious. It's high in nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, which are the three sort of key elements that people look for in fertiliser. And then you've got basically it's similar in its consistency and feel to wet tea. So like a bag of tea, it feels like that. So it's like sort of granular and a bit grainy but uniform. And then they and so we sell it here by the ton. So we just sell it. Frass Fridays is a thing, so people come and collect their frass, and we also frass.
Every second week?
No, every Friday is Frass Friday.
Every Friday. I love it. I feel like it's a hashtag that we should promote somehow. Okay, so it's interesting because you mentioned that first. Is that the byproduct that you or the output that you were thinking, this is the first cab off the rank, this is the thing we're going to sell first, or is they both equally weighted? Or
No, the protein is certainly more valuable at this stage. I just say for us first, I think, because it rolls off the tongue a little quicker. But for us, we need organic matter into our soils. Our soils are really terribly degraded and need more organic matter. So it is a valuable product, but the protein is the focus as far as offtakes are concerned. It has a higher value. So, yeah.
Got it. And then the protein itself has some properties that mean that it can be used in certain applications and not others. Can you just talk about that for a sec?
Yeah, so the Insect Protein Association has sort of taken a pretty deep look at the regulation, and we sat on the working group for Animal Health Australia to understand like where the landscape for regulation of insect protein for livestock feed was. And after doing all that research and really looking at all of the regulation and guidelines, you realise, okay, by and large, insect protein that has eaten actual waste or any waste stream that's come from sort of a restaurant sort of and beyond, even if it's in the kitchen, has a potential to have meat in it, and then that means it's not suited for ruminants. And so to make things easier, the Protein Association has basically said, look, we're not going to – we recommend that insect producers don't feed insect protein to ruminants, even though there are some states that don't feed insects as a feed. And then, of course –
What's ruminant, by the way?
It's an animal with 3 stomachs, so a cow or a goat or a sheep.
Got it.
Yeah. So it's mostly around mad cow.
This is like the whole mad cow disease avoidance thing going on.
That's exactly right. Yeah, exactly right.
Perfect.
Yeah, and so not suited for ruminants, but really great for poultry, aquaculture and pets. And pets, we mean dog food, cat food, those sorts of things.
Got it. And then you just mentioned the Insect Foundation. Like this is you guys set this up, or you were part of setting it up, right? Like this didn't exist before you did, really, or they all happened at the same time. How did that happen?
That's right. So I think the biggest thing when I started the company, I was like, okay, I really want to talk to government. I want to understand this, and a lot of us that were starting back then in 2014 were finding each other on forums, and we're like, does this mean something? Like, what about this regulation? What about that? And each of us would give it try at calling, Department of Ag or Fazance, and nobody there knew either because it was new. And so it was like really evident really early that if we were going to move this, we needed to sort of collaborate together to go to because government doesn't work very well with individuals, and by that I mean companies, right? It's much
of course they need a body to talk to.
That's right. It's much, and rightly so. Like they don't want to be seen to play favourites, and so it was evident very early that we really needed to do that. And so we were like, okay, let's get together and build an organisation. And it's been slow. Everyone that's on the board is a startup person themselves, and so we can volunteer, it's difficult. But we've made some massive inroads and done some really great stuff. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and some of the other types of ventures that are in that, are they all trying to solve this food waste problem, or they're in different parts of the insect protein value chain, if that's the right word?
Yeah, and not at all. So, we sort of cover the gambit with the association of the supply chain. So people who have been looking at tech for insect production, people who are looking at genetics for insect production, researchers in academia, and then, of course, you've got producers, people who are looking at managing waste, people who are looking at making protein, and then others that are like, okay, we want to make human consumption stuff, or I don't want to make any insects. I want to just take an insect product and make an FMCG, which is a fast-moving consumer good, like a cake or a muffin or something like that. And so that's been really great because, yeah, exactly, the bug snacks. So it's been really great to have that many different people in there, because you sort of, by and large now, you start to learn from each other, because if I can spend time talking to somebody who's trying to make a bar, their problems inform my decisions. Right? Because if they're my end client at one stage, then what they're dealing with is something I have to think about now, and that's been really valuable.
Right. And then in terms of your I mean, you've obviously got motivations with respect to Goterra, specifically in solving a food waste problem, and also creating an amazing product that would be a better product than having to, grow a bunch of cows, or I'm going to probably get to that later. But have you got kind of a broader, just a wild view for what this industry should look like in terms of insect protein generally? Like, what are your kind of wild view there?
Yeah, it's a big one. I think it starts with because all of us are like, we need to feed the world in 2050 and it's going to need 70% more protein or whatever.
Right.
And we're like, yeah, insects can do that. What I would like to see from the industry is a greater focus on collaboration, so that we can all lift, the high tide lifts all boats type thing. And whilst ever we're trying to work alone and sort of hide ourselves from each other, which we do mostly because we don't want people to get our ideas, but there's ways to collaborate without giving up IP. And I just would like to see more collaboration in the industry. We're seeing it at a global level.
Yeah.
It's been really inspiring. I'd like to see more of it. I'd like to see us model the Australian agricultural industry in collaboration. And then I think, as we start to see companies go to real commercial scale, so Yinsect, which is a big mealworm company in France, just landed another couple of $100 million in finance and funding. And so it's like, okay, now that we're seeing serious money being pumped into the industry and we start to get higher volumes of product out there, you would like to see a little deepening and maturing of the supply chains, right, where people are starting to figure out ways of how to use this protein, where to use it, kinds of processing. Right now we know how to farm them. We know what kinds of factories we want to build, but it's still pretty light on downstream stuff. And so I think as the industry continues to mature, you'll see more of that, which will be cool.
And do you think particular countries or local regions have kind of a competitive advantage? Like is, France, I think was the one place you just mentioned, or Australia, like is anyone kind of, they've got the perfect conditions for doing stuff with insect protein, or is it not, everything's controlled anyway, it's not like that?
It's all pretty much controlled. Like Asia has the best conditions,
in terms of the weather or in terms of other conditions?
Southeast Asia particularly has, if you don't want to have to worry too much about weather, Southeast Asia is your place. But by and large, everything's automated and industrialised in this sense, and so it's pickles and potatoes there. But I think the bigger question is, like, where's the best? I think, and I am not biased, I don't believe in saying this, that Australia is a unique place to have an insect protein industry. We have a legacy of Australian culture that's clean and green, and people respect our ethical processes in agriculture. And so I think we have a really strong opportunity, particularly in the insect protein for food space, to make our mark high-end, quality, assured products that have a global impact. So, I think there's a really strong place for Australia there.
Yeah, and do you think I mean, you're obviously solving two parts of an equation here, but do you see yourself primarily creating a source of food or solving a source of waste?
It's evolved over time. I now see us as a company whose main superpower is the ability to figure out ways to get robots to make insects do jobs. And I don't particularly care if those insects end up being something we use to turn into plastic or something that we use to make a fertilizer, or if it's something you dab around your eyes as a moisturizer. I'm not really tied to any one thing, and I think to do so really limits the opportunities that insects can provide. What we do well is think about how we can get autonomous machines to get insects to become service providers, right? So manage waste, make protein for human consumption, manage plastics, those
improve healthcare.
Oh, yeah, So
that's a fascinating idea.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. I never really thought about your kind of the unit as being an insect automation kind of orchestration kind of layer. And I guess, when we spoke last time, it sort of became clear that so many of the things that you were like, well, let's see what happens if we do X or do Y, was about trying to understand, well, what set of conditions lead to the insect being able to survive this long, or, terminate at this time, or output a certain type of product or whatever it is that they're doing. I mean, look, let's talk a little bit about that. What's the process been? Because Goterra's been around for a few years now, not like a lot of years, but a few years. And so what was the process to arrive at your understanding of the way these insects worked now?
I think I was really fortunate I didn't know any better. I'm not a scientist, I'm a biologist, I'm an entomologist, I'm not an engineer. Right. And so I think that's actually been a fortunate thing for us. It's also been a hard thing, don't get me wrong, skills are important. But I think because we didn't know in the beginning and I was driving it, then everybody that came on after that were all sort of followed my lead. And back in the beginning, we used to say a lot, we don't say it as much anymore, but we used to say it a lot. It's like, don't tell me you can't when we just invented it, right? So this idea you can't possibly tell me you can't when we just made it up. How do we already not know how this works when we
know that we know that we can't? Yeah.
Yeah, how would we?
Hey, why is it that doesn't get said much anymore, by the way?
Well, because by the nature of how you evolve as a company, the better you get at what you do, the less that gets said. So we don't say can't anymore, right? Because I kept going, there's no such thing as can't. And so it was all Pavlov's dog.
Right, so you've beaten it out of them. It's not that you've got to a certain point in your IP that you're like, everything's possible now. Still, there's a bunch of things that probably aren't possible, but you're not allowed to say it anymore.
No. It's more just the mindset, right? So it's just like, hey, sure. We can't say no when firstly we made it, so it's ours and we can do what we like. And secondly, we can't turn up to work going, this isn't going to work. Because if that was true, what are we even doing here, right?
Might as well go home now.
Yeah, so I think...
Just on that point, actually.
Yeah.
The types of people who you have to bring in to do work for you, who are quite specialised and technical and like certainty, I would expect, or maybe not. What's the nature of these people, and are you having to evolve a culture to bring those people into that mode of thinking?
Yeah, super hard. It's really, really hard, and it's difficult because everybody joins an organisation, any organisation, ours. The first day is never, this job is whatever. Everyone's like, I'm so happy to be here, right? Bye. And so the challenge we have is to manage expectations as well as we can to be able to say, this is a difficult place to be. It is hard for individuals who have personality types or characteristics in the way they work where they're like, I want certainty, I want structure, I work really well with conformed ideals. And I'm like, figure it out. Good luck. See you in half an hour. Or we're like, hey, this doesn't work. Pull a 7-ton machine apart. That's daunting even for the most experienced fitter. And so sometimes you'll see new people when parts of our machinery will shut down and they'll be like, and they just sort of look at it and I'm like, she ain't going to fix this now. And they're like, maybe if we just, I'll just call this other guy and we sort of walk around it hoping she'll just kick back on. And it's like, hey man, I get it. This isn't a normal piece of machinery that you found in a factory that you worked at before. But the fastest way to become intimately connected to this machine is to work with it when it's broken. So break it. And I think, we have not always got that right. And sometimes we've had employees that just, this has not been the right place for them. And we're not ashamed to say that out loud. And I think it's important to do that compassionately and just be like, absolutely no problem. Our head of people, Laura, has spent a lot of time working on our culture and how we talk to new hires and how we have a 90-day plan to sort of keep doing temperature checks. Are you still okay? How are you feeling? Because I think sometimes when you are moving fast, you get going and then you're like, is everyone back there still? And that's not enough.
Head down. Just on that point, actually, is it incremental wins that have got you to where you are in terms of your understanding of how this machine works, or is it breakthrough kind of stuff? You're like, oh, that thing was entirely wrong and we completely rethought it and now we know how to do it. Like, how is the innovation happening in the field you're in?
Yeah, so it's sort of like a combination of both, where the big win happens really infrequently, right? So you'll get something really big right and be like, we did it. And then the incremental stuff comes after that, because big wins still are unknown knowns. So they're like, we know that this is better, but here are the 7 million things that have now changed that we have to adapt or modify or change or fix our own other stuff so that this can be what we want it to be. And so, that in its own self is really hard to do, particularly as a founder and a leader. I'm very focused on what's next. It's part of who I am, and so which is great, but it's also really difficult for me to remember that those small wins need to be celebrated, because the gap between them and the big win that everyone stops for is so long. And so I'm like, cool, you fixed it, what next? And I need to remember that our team needs us to stop for a second and go, bloody well done. Look at that, just bending at 90 degrees. That's good for you. It's so it's a silly small thing, but like if you have incremental wins every week but nobody says anything, then the similar incremental failures feel more prominent, because particularly as Australians, celebrate wins ever. Like Australians are like, yeah, whatever, get on with it. And so we only focus as Australians on losses. And so, that's been a really difficult one for me to really do better at, is remembering, hey, just stop when we have those small
stop, enjoy. And then is it like from your back, what's your backstory that gets you to, I guess, to this point where you're running this business? I'm interested in it from a problem space perspective, but also, you find yourself now in a role where there's the leadership and a vision required, but you're still on the tools and in the detail to a degree. Like, how have you arrived at this point, I guess?
Oh, it was a long and windy road.
Oh, we love that. Let's talk about that.
I have a fairly eclectic career. Look, I think the thing that was fortunate for me is that life happened, and not great things in life. So I started off in agriculture, and I was doing very well in agriculture, had a great job, and then my son died, and I was very young, and he was only 2.5, and then that just upside down my whole world. And so the process then of getting back sort of to be mentally okay again after that took well over 10 years. And in those times when you're not doing well mentally, you end up doing a lot of things. So I was in Texas training horses, and then I was doing this and I was doing that. And my husband, I married a US Marine, and the war was going on. And so now I'm like hundreds of thousands of other military wives who end up having their careers shaped, subverted, and kind of compacted and squashed by their own partner's career. And so I did marketing and social engineering and stuff like that. So, but the fortunate thing is around that is that I got really, really good at finding joy in shitty jobs that I didn't like. And,
I wasn't expecting that outcome, by the way.
And when you can do that, then you start to find good stuff in things that you didn't expect to. And so I think the one thing that whole entire not so great but really amazing experience taught me was you will find answers outside of where you think they are every time. You must remember to look outside of where you think they are every time, and you must sort of get rid of the bias that sits where you're like, oh, I'm an ag business, so the only people I need to talk to are these people over here. Those biases really hinder you. And I think, being sort of having to sort of live this weird kinetic life where I had to do a lot of different things that if you'd asked me 10 years before, would you ever manage a tanning salon? My answer would have been never. not death before dishonor. No.
Not on your life.
And instead, now I'm like, you want to know? There are 20 different tanning beds that I can speak quite eloquently to. I can help you select your tanning bed. But more importantly, that company taught me more about effective sales strategy and customer service than any other company I've ever worked for. And those things live. It doesn't matter if you're selling tanning salon or maggot robots. Those things are endurable in your expertise. Yeah. I know. Maybe we can make
I feel like you should rename the company Maggot Robots, by the way.
Yeah, we're getting shirts. Ask me about my maggot robot. I feel like that's a good conversation.
That's so good. And so hold on, some of that happened in the US. How did that bring you back to Australia? Or how did you come back to Australia with all that?
I was super war weary. 2010, I told my husband, I was like, and yet, I'm done. I can't do any more. It's been delightful, but I can't. And that was on the eve of his 5th deployment. So he did 2 more before we could finish up. And by then I was like, I have to go. And the only thing that was really keeping me going was sort of talking about ag and getting ready to come back to Australia. And so that was the plan. And it had been the plan since when we first, got married. I was like, I'm happy to stay here, but when you're done, you go home. And so, we came back to Australia. We were going to go back to farming, and we didn't have the portfolio or the equity or even the credit history that was needed because I'd been gone for 14 years. My husband was American, and so he had no financial capability in Australia.
Wherewithal.
Everything was American. So we were basically 18 again, like, hey, man, what do you reckon? And everyone's like, no. So and buying a farm, a working farm in Australia requires so much equity, it's prohibitive. Like so much equity. And so, so then it was like, all right, well, maybe we do little things and we do this. And so it was just this sort of, how can I shove what I want into the constraints that I have? And then, small chicken farm, a free-range chicken farm, that's too expensive. It'll cost me dollars to feed them. Okay, maybe we can make the feed. How can we make the feed? Algae, insects, and maggoteria. So it's all very logical.
Interesting. Yeah, it's kind of like connecting the dots looking backwards makes sense, but at the time you weren't like, you know what, I've had an epiphany about maggot robots.
No.
And we need to follow that through the finish line.
Yeah, it was always evolving. And influence from others helps, right? Like it was only when I first started, we designed the robot, we figured out that we thought that this was a great idea, but even then I was still thinking about protein. And it wasn't until I was working with other investors and things, and they were like, this is not a protein business. And I'm like, what? Yeah, the protein's the cool part. And then they look, and then they're like, we put all the numbers on the board. I'm like, it is a waste business. Anyway, let me tell you about my maggot robots that manage waste. And so, but that's not a pivot.
But has that evolved though now?
I think
if you just spoke before, robot overlords and the like.
A girl can dream. So it's like, I think it always evolves. Like, like I think I keep saying it. Like I choose a quote every year. And the quote this year for me is Miles Davis, it took me years to learn to sing like myself. And I think that's true for a founder and it's true for companies as an entity, right? Like Goterra 3 years ago didn't really know who she was. And she was kind of like, we're kind of a thing and we think we're awesome. And Olympia was the same. Like I was very much like, so I'm a founder. Like I was not really thinking that
whatever that means.
Yeah, like I'm an entrepreneur and I didn't have the confidence to say that and I felt awkward saying it. And so when that's true, then the narrative you have is less clear. It's a little squishy. It's not as succinct. It's not as sharp. You can work on it all day long, but the real problem isn't that you haven't spent enough time thinking about your narrative. It's because you don't own it yet and it's not true because the maturity is not there. So we continue to evolve and get better at telling our story and knowing who we are, and those two things feed themselves, and off you go.
And then what are the, like, from where you're standing now, obviously this might evolve or will evolve, but what are the kind of the aspirations for Goterra? Like, what is your measure of success maybe 3 to 5 years out from here as a first milestone?
Maggot robots everywhere, which is it's a very definitive metric. Look, we expect to be the go-to waste management infrastructure across Australia and Southeast Asia in the next 3 to 5 years. Yeah. That's about as big as
that's very, very succinct. Like, we don't need more to that answer. That's actually and like, if I'm going to just sort of reflect that though, like, what's the big kind of systemic challenge to doing that? Is it getting the machine to work, or getting enough people to buy the machine, or the deployment of the kind of the end-to-end infrastructure that supports the whole thing working? Like, what are the big challenges here?
Us moving fast enough and well enough. Like, the machine works, the technology works. That's not an issue. There's more than enough market pull. This is not something that I have to spend a lot of time, or people want solutions, and so the discussion isn't about please like my maggot robot. It's about a deeper level of sales negotiation around how do we make it work for you and model that and those sorts of things. I think that part's all solved. The biggest challenge for us today is how do we grow quickly, well, and so and usually fast will not equal good. Fast hit a wall, fast not accurate, fast forget some things, and fast sloppy. Right. And so how do you move purposefully and forcefully forward without going so fast you run yourself over? And I think that's the biggest challenge for us. Don't drink our own bathwater. Stay right in the sweet spot of being humble and shit scared, and just work really hard to get those things across the line, because we have the technology to be able to do what we need to do. We have the coolest, smartest humans working on it. So it's ours to make happen, and we just have to make sure that we want the throttle, I think.
Yeah, amazing. And then just probably one kind of closing question for me. In all of that journey, there was a lot of kind of, I guess, uncertainty, maybe a grouping now, but a lot of kind of things that were happening, right? I mean, where's your sanity coming from in all of this? Or is there sanity? Maybe not.
Is it the way I do my hair? What's giving it away? I absolutely feel like there's no way to truly manage that well at speed. Like, you just have to be more mindful of your own needs. And so creating opportunities to check in on yourself, creating space and time to have a break, but you're going to stuff that up, because you'll be looking down and you're like, I can't take a break. I have to stay here. And then you'll hit a wall and you're like, oh, I'm going to need a break. And you probably could have taken it 2 days earlier, but if you tried to have that discussion 2 days earlier, like, there would have been violent resistance. And so instead of trying to stop that from being true, instead I've just been trying to be more compassionate to when it finally hits. So it's like, well, I'm going to need a break. I'm sorry, I could have taken one earlier, but I'm going to give myself this time. And that's right. I think we give ourselves so much pressure. It's like, here's the ylang ylang oil and the scented chakra something. And like, if you read these 6 books and you listen to these 4 podcasts and you sit still in a steamy bathroom for 4 hours, then you'll be fine. It's like, probably not. Like, my best, like, quiet times that have kept me going for weeks have been to walk the Goterra dog for 5 minutes, because he's such an idiot. And so we go out and walk in the track behind the farm, and it's 5 minutes alone. He's such an idiot that I can't look at my phone. I have to, like, run after him because he, runs over to other people's warehouses and he climbs up on stupid stuff. And so, like, just 5 minutes of not thinking about anything else but this silly dog is, like, perfect. Like, way better than an excruciating hour in a hot yoga session. Like, oh, kill me.
I mean, my sort of thought on that is you got enough to overthink in your day-to-day. Why would you have a form of relaxation that required you to overthink?
Amen. You know, like sometimes the best relaxation is just to eat pizza off your chest while watching Netflix. Like, can we just reduce the synapses pressure to zero? Like, yeah.
Amazing. Oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad we got to talk again. And hopefully the audio is good this time. We're going to find out. But there's going to be a bunch of links and stuff in all the bios that we put up. Goterra, I think you guys are doing such amazing stuff. And I'm so stoked around the technology as well, because I think obviously it's got global appeal. And if it solves two problems instead of one, it's just a gimme, and I'm like really pumped to see where it goes. So thank you so much for again being on the show again.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Vincent. Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.